This is Bluebook Digital SAT 6 Math Module 2. A manager is responsible for ordering supplies for a shaved ice shop. The shop's inventory starts with 4,500 paper cups, and the manager estimates that 70 of these paper cups are used each day. Based on this estimate, in how many days will the supply of paper cups reach 1,700? I would write this as 4,500 minus 70 times the number of days gets you to 1,700. So I'm going to subtract 1,700. I'm looking at 2,800 and put the 70D on the other side, which just gives you the nice, neat round number of 40. An angle RST, the measure of R is 63 degrees. What could be the measure in degrees of angle S? So this is 63, and then RST. Well, of course it could not be 180, right? Because they have to add up to 180. Could it be, well, 180 minus 63 is what the other two have to add up to. So you could say that this and this, right? So it has to be true that S plus T is 117. So neither S nor T could be more than 117. So the only acceptable answer is 116, right? It'd be 116 plus 1. So if this was this and this was this, of course it's not drawn to scale. It would be an incredibly narrow triangle, but the only valid answer is A as an apple. Y is greater than 4x plus 8. I would just test these by example. So for example, for answer choice A, is it true that 19 is greater than 4 times 2 plus 8? And is it also true that 30 is greater than 4 times 4 plus 8? And is it also true that 41 is greater than 4 times 6 plus 8? Well, let's see one at a time, right? So that's 19 is greater than 16, of course. 30 is greater than 24, yes. And then 41 is greater than 32, right? Is a yes. So the answer is just A. Function f is defined by that. For what value of x does f of x equal 5? As in, what input value gives you 5 as the output value? So 5 equals 9/7 x plus 8/7. I'm going to subtract 8/7 from both sides by going common denominator and writing this as 35/7 minus 8/7 equals 9/7 x, which is what? 27/7 equals 9/7 x, and multiply the whole thing by 7 to clear out the denominators. Is 27 is 9x, so x is just 3. During a portion of a flight, a small airplane's cruising speed varied between 150 miles per hour and 170 miles per hour. Which inequality best represents a situation where S is the cruising speed in miles per hour during this portion of the flight? Well, this is the definition of being between two numbers, inclusive, which is just D as in dog. The graph models the number of active projects the company was working on X months after the end of November 2012, where X is between 0 and 6 inclusive. According to this model, what is the predicted number of active projects the company was working on at the end of November 2012? X months after the end of November 2012, which means literally right at the end of November 2012 is the starting point of the graph. So it's effectively f of 0. It's the y-intercept, which just is 5. In the linear function h of 28 is 15 and h of 26 is 22. So you're looking at a line that goes through the 2 points 28 comma 15 and 26 comma 22. So the first thing to find is the slope, which is m, which is the difference in y's over the difference in x's, which you can write as y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2, which a lot of people write as rise over run, which here would be 15 minus 22 over 28 minus 26, which is -7/2. And then to get it in slope-intercept form, you could say that m itself is negative 7/2, and then you could use either pair as x and y. I'm actually going to write it both ways to show you that it'll work both ways. So 15 is negative 7/2 times 28 plus b, or 22 is negative 7/2 times 26 plus b. Negative 7/2 times 28 is negative 98. So this would be 15 is negative 98 plus b, which means b would be 113. And then here 22 equals negative 7/2 times 26 is negative 91 plus b. So again, b is 113. So the general equation is y equals negative 7/2 x plus 113. Number of cars, maximum number of passenger and crew. Table shows the linear relationship. So it's actually very similar to the one that we did before, between the number of cars C on a commuter train and the maximum number of passengers and crew P that the train can carry. Which equation represents the linear relationship between C and P? Well, let's do this the way that we just did the previous question. So it's a line through. I'm going to use the first row and the last row. 3, 174 and 10, 559. So the slope is difference in y over difference in x is 174 minus 559 over 3 minus 10, which is negative 385 divided by negative 7 is 55. And then when you go to put it in slope-intercept form, you could have used any of the 3 pairs. I'm just going to use this pair. So it would be 559 equals 55 times 10 plus b. So 559 equals 550 plus b. So b as in boy is 9. So the general equation is y equals 55x plus 9. Now, of course, they don't write it that way. So the way that I wrote it was y is max number of passengers and crew, which they define as P as in Paul. And then in mine, X was number of cars, which they use C as in cat. So this is actually this. And now which way did they write that? So they put the, so you could get to here and still mess this up. So you could have written it as P minus 55C equals 9. Do they write it like that? No. So it's not B as in boy. And then it's not that either. So what they do is effectively from here, they multiply this entire expression by negative 1. So they can write it as negative P plus 55C is negative 9, which then in collapsed clever form is this, right? 55C minus P is negative 9. Yeah. W squared plus 12W minus 40 equals 0. Well, this must be quadratic formula. So you could either write the quadratic formula the long way, which is probably what I would recommend, or you could get Desmos to show you the solution. It's not a hand factorable quadratic as integers, but you could do it as f of x equals x squared plus 12x, x squared, no fraction, here we go, okay, plus 12x minus 40. And then if you zoom out, it'll give you the decimals. So it's 2.718 and negative 14.718. And then I would just try these one at a time until you get one of those if you want to do it the Desmos way. So 6 minus 2 times radical 19 is negative 2. No, it's not A. So I'm just going to hit these one at a time on the calculator and eliminate them. So it's not this. 2 radical 19 is 8.7. No. Radical 19 No, it's got to be D as in dog, right? Negative 6 plus 2 radical 19, yeah, gives you this number. Now let's write it the long official way, the algebraic way. So this would be negative 12 plus or minus the square root of quantity 12 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 40 all over 2 times 1. Negative 12 plus or minus the root of 144 plus 160 over 2 is negative 12 plus or minus the root of 304 divided by 2. And then 304 is obviously divisible by 4 because 100 is divisible by 4. So I'm going to go piece at a time. You could have written this as 4 times 76, which means it's negative 12 plus or minus 2 root 76 over 2. And then 76 is further divisible by radical reduction, right? Because 76 is 4 times 19. So then this becomes negative 12 plus or minus 4 radical 19 over 2. And then at the end, that's negative 6 plus or minus 2 radical 19. So the acceptable answers would have been negative 6 plus 2 root 19 or negative 6 minus 2 root 19. What is the y-coordinate of the y-intercept of the graph of 3/7 x equals negative 5/9 y plus 21? This would be a great example of using Desmos. Unless I'm missing something, you can just literally type this into Desmos and it will make sense of the line and show you its diagram just immediately. So 3x over 7 is negative 5y over 9 plus 21. Yeah, and it just shows you the picture, right? And then the y-coordinate of the y-intercept is 37.8, and that's it. It's almost like cheating here. Okay. What system of linear equations is represented by the lines shown? Well, they go through a couple of exact points. So both of the lines go through 8, 0. Now, the top line, I'm going to write this to be super clear. The top line goes through 3, 4 and 8, 0. And let's find its equation the old-fashioned way, right? So m, which is the slope, which is the rise over run, is this, which gives you 4 over negative 5. So then you have the slope, negative 4/5, and it goes through 3, 4. So in slope-intercept form, that's 4 equals negative 4/5 times 3 plus b. Now these aren't going to come out to nice, neat fractions the way that you want them to. Negative 4/5 times 3, and then 4 minus that quantity gives you that b is 6.4. So now I have y equals negative 4/5 x plus 6.4, and then set that one aside, okay? And then the bottom line is through. You could have, of course, done this on Desmos by probably just typing them in and trying them one at a time and looking at the picture, but I kind of think it's preferable to do it this way, or at least know how to do it this way. The bottom line is through 3, 2 and 8, 0. Okay, so the slope is 2 minus 0 over 3 minus 8, which is 2 over negative 5. So now you have the slope, negative 2/5, and through 3, 2. So in slope-intercept form, it's 2 equals negative 2/5 times 3 plus b. Negative 2/5 times 3, and then 2 minus that answer jumps to b is 3.2. So now you have y equals negative 2/5 x plus 3.2. Okay, so the algebra is irritating, but we have now found the equations of both of the lines. Now, they make all of the coefficients integers. So I'm guessing for the top one that's circled in blue, you multiply everything by 5. And that here would give you 5y is negative 4x plus 32. And then the bottom one, if you multiply everything by, 5, would give you 5y equals negative 2x plus 16. Now, they put the x's and the y's on the left-hand sides. So let's see. It is this system, but you still have to figure out which answer choice that is. So I'm going to put the x's and the y's. So for the top one, it's 4x plus 5y equals 32. I hope that's an answer choice. 4x plus 5y is 32. Is 32. Oh, did they write it the other way? Oh, this is so irritating, right? So it's the 4 and the 5 is, oh, it must be either the C or D, right? So they read it as, yeah. So I see what's happening, right? So this becomes the bottom one in D as in dog. This is actually the same thing. If you multiply everything by negative 2, becomes negative 8x minus 10y is negative 64. That should be D as in dog. Now let's just make sure that, so let me color code again, right? So this one became this one for D as in dog, which means the other one right here should be the top one in D as in dog, should be the 4x plus 10y is 32. So this would have been 2x plus 5y is 16. Yeah, which is the same as 4x plus 10y equals 32. Ugh, what an annoying question. So it actually is, it is D as in dog. The solution to the given system of equations is xy. What is the value of 6 times x minus 2? You'd probably be best off, given that you have Desmos, just typing this in and seeing the solution for xy, just making sure you provide the right piece of information as the final answer. So I'm recopying, that's that, and then okay, and then zooming out to see the solution, which is at 281.5, comma 33.625. So x is 281.5. Okay, which means that this is this, which I can just hit on the calculator, right? So 281.5 minus 2 multiplied by 6, yeah, is 1,677. What is the minimum value of the given function? Well, this you could just look at on Desmos, or if you know the rules about axis of symmetry, you can probably say it very quickly, but let's just look at the picture. So 48x plus 2304, and if you zoom out, it'll show you the minimum is 1728. The other way of remembering it is that the axis of symmetry in any quadratic is negative b over 2a. Axis of symmetry is negative b over 2a, which in this case is 48 over 2 is 24. So 24 is the axis of symmetry. Let me draw a really simple sketch of what that gets you, right? So x equals 24 is the axis of symmetry, and then f of 24 is the y value of the vertex, right? So the vertex is 24 comma f of 24, and just to prove the point, I'm going to hit it really carefully on the calculator, right? So 24 squared minus the quantity 48 times 24 plus 2304, yeah, And this right here is 1728, which is the answer. Although just graphing it on Desmos gets you there much, much quicker. How many solutions does the given equation have? Well, if x were to be crossed out from both sides, you would have negative 49 equals negative 98, which is obviously never true. But there's the one weird exception, of course, in the language of mathematics, which is that if x is 0. If x is 0, then it's 0 times something equals 0 times something, which is true. So the answer is 1. You could have also looked at the pictures on Desmos, or even known that you have two lines with different slopes that both pass through the origin. So the origin is the solution. But let's say we're going to graph them as lines, right? Is negative 49x, and then negative 98x. And then you can see that they only actually cross. Yeah, so you have to adjust the window to be able to see this more clearly. Let me see if I can adjust to have it be just from, suppose I go negative 1 to positive 1, and then I go negative 10 to positive 10. I'm hoping that lets you see the resolution a little bit more obviously. Yeah. You have to play around with the dimensions of the window, but they only cross at the origin. So the answer is exactly 1. Function g is defined by that. The value of g of 7 minus w is 0, where w is a constant. What is the sum of all possible values of w? This is a little bit trickier, but not impossible. So I'm going to recopy the original expression. First of all, what are the zeros of this original thing right here? Well, it's either when x is 0, or when x is 2, or when x is negative 6, which is to say if you went to graph them, let's put those spots on the sketch, right? So 0 gives you 0, 2 gives you 0, and negative 6 gives you 0. Now, I'm going to use Desmos to our advantage to fill in what that actual graph looks like. So and then let me go back to standard. There we go. So you get kind of a wacky function where it loops up and then back down. So you could get this to show you its behavior. The answer is that, yeah, because it's a total even-powered polynomial, it has similar end behavior. Let me adjust the window one more time to get a better feel for this. I'm just going to go from negative 10 to positive 10 so we can see. Yeah, here's a much better picture. Yeah, it's sort of a W shape, right? So it has similar end behavior as in going to infinity upwards for both, but then it bounces off and back up, then down and through, and then back up. Okay, so the things that make it true that the original is 0 are either 0, 2, or negative 6. As in the quantity 7 minus w as a unit, 7 minus w must be either 0 or 2 or negative 6. So there's this, and then this, and then this. So this gives you that w is 7, right? This gives you that w is 5, and this gives you that w is 13. Then the sum of these, right? 7 plus 5 plus 13 is 25. A grove of 6 rows of birch trees and 5 rows of maple. A grove has 6 rows of birch trees and 5 rows of maple trees. Each row of birch trees has 8 trees. So let me see if I can start sketching the picture of this. Each row of birch trees has 8 trees 20 feet or taller and 6 trees shorter than 20 feet. Each row of maple trees has 9 trees 20 feet or taller and 7 trees shorter than 20 feet. A tree from one of these rows will be selected at random. It's a probability. Sorry, I didn't even get that until now. What is the probability of selecting a maple tree given that the tree is 20 feet or taller. Okay, so how about this? How many total, number total that are 20 feet or taller? Let's figure that out first. How many are there total that are 20 feet or taller? There's 6 rows of the birch, and each row has 8 that are 20 feet or taller. So that's 48 for the birches. And then for the maple trees, there's 5 rows, and each row has 9 that are 20 feet or taller. So that's a 45. So the number total that are 20 feet or taller is 93. So now it's saying if you happen to choose one that are 20 feet or taller, what are the chances that it's a maple? So it's the maples that are 20 feet or taller, which we just said was this out of this. It's 45 over 93. Yeah, which I'm going to hit math reduce to 15 over 31. A rectangle is inscribed in a circle such that each vertex of the rectangle lies on the circumference of the circle. Sure, which is the definition of inscribed. The diagonal of the rectangle is twice the length of the shortest side of the rectangle. The diagonal is twice the length of the shortest side of the rectangle. Okay. And then the area of the rectangle is that. What is the length in units of the diameter of the circle? So I'm going to call the shortest side x, which means that this, which is the diameter, but also the longest diagonal of the rectangle, is a 2x. And it creates a special right triangle situation. So this green triangle here must be a special right triangle, because if you look at the reference card, it shows you that if the hypotenuse is double the short side, you're dealing with a 30, 60, 90. So you're actually looking at this and this, where it's x root 3, and 2x. Okay, so now it tells you the area of the rectangle is 1089 radical 3. So the area is, of course, x times x root 3, and that's what equals 1089 root 3. So it's x squared equals 1089, which is x being 33. And then the diameter of the circle is, of course, the hypotenuse of the right triangle. That's the long diagonal of the box is 66. The positive number a is 2,241% of the sum of the positive numbers b and c. As in, a is, I'm going to write it as 2241 divided by 100 times the sum of b and c. Okay? And b is 83% of c. Okay? b is 83 hundredths, and of course of means times in math, so times c. What percent of b is a? So you must have to do this by substitution. If you could solve for c in terms of b, then you could substitute in. So here in the pink, I'm going to say that this is b divided by the quantity 83 100ths. And then dividing by 83 100ths is the same as multiplying by 100 over 83. So c is, I'm going to write this as 1.2048 b. So now if I substitute this in right here, I can directly connect a and b. So now I'm looking at a is 22.41 times b plus 1.2048 b. So that's 22.41 times 2.2048 b. So A is 49.41 times B. What percent of B is A? So now when you translate this from math back to words, it would be A is, it's 49.41 times B, which is the same as, I guess if you wanted to switch it, you could say it as this, right? It's 4941 over 100, and over 100 is the definition of percent. So it's 4,941% of B. Tricky substitution. In the given system of equations, P is a constant. If the system has no solution, what is the value of P? I bet this would be a perfect example of actually doing it on Desmos. In fact, I believe that for this question in particular, Desmos is probably the quickest and most helpful way of doing it because it will give you a slider. Now you do have to copy it carefully. So 7/8 y minus 5/8 x equals 4/7 minus 7/8. Oh, sorry, I messed that up, of course. Is 4/7. Got to get used to the syntax for closing the parens. Minus 7/8 y. Okay. And then completely separately, 5/4 x plus 7/4 equals py, and it's going to offer you a slider, and you'll say yes, plus quantity 15/4, add slider p, yes. Okay, then zooming out. Now you have to understand, the system has no solution when the lines are parallel. So you might have to adjust the window, but you can definitely move p left and right until they're parallel. Now, let me adjust the window back to standard here. So I'm just going to say from -10 to 10 and -10 to 10. Okay. Now what value of P creates parallel lines? Well, it seems to me that it's 3.6. Just scrolling. No? Oh, it's close, right? So I see what's going to happen. It's going to be a tricky fraction that actually lets you solve this. So it's something like 3.5 or 3.6 or 3.4. Is it 3.5? Let's see. If we zoom way out, I'm going to zoom way out and then zoom back in to make sure that it's 3.5. Yeah, it's 3.5. Sure. Although there theoretically could have been some really ugly situation where it's a crazy decimal where you'd have to adjust it more, but 3.5 is the answer. So that was a great example of applying the advanced features of Desmos to solve a tricky math question. Okay. Table shows three values of x and their corresponding values of g of x, where g of x equals, the quantity, it's the function over x plus 3, and f is a linear function. What is the y-intercept of the graph of y equals f of x in the xy plane? G of x is the function over quantity x plus 3. So wouldn't that mean that, for example, using the top row, that would mean that you get 3 when you do f of -27 over -27 plus 3. Okay? As in 3 is f of -27 over -24. As in f of -27 equals -72. So, so it goes through, here we go, now I see how to do it. So it goes through -27, -72. And then completely separately from that, so set that aside, I'm going to use the third row. The third row would be, using this here, would be 5 is f of 21 over the quantity 21 plus 3, as in 5 is f of 21 over 24. So f of 21 equals 120. So now you know you're talking about going through 21 comma 120. And then it tells you that it's actually linear. So now you're talking about a line that goes through those 2 points. And now you can just find its attributes the way that we normally do for simpler questions, right? So m, which is the slope, is difference in y over difference in x, is negative 72 minus 120 over negative 27 minus 21. Negative 72 minus 120 is negative 192 over negative 48, which isn't that just, yeah, the slope is 4. So then you have slope 4, and you could have used either of the points to confirm the y-intercept, but I'm going to say slope 4 and through, let me use the blue one, and through 21, 120, when you go to put it in mx plus b form, would be 120 equals 4 times 21 plus b. So 120 minus 84, b is 36. So the general equation of the line is y equals 4x plus 36. And then, of course, the y-intercept is 0, 36. A circle has center G and points M and N lie on the circle. Okay, let's always draw this. MH and NH are tangent to the circle at points M and N respectively. Okay, so I'm going to say that this is, this is M as in Mary and this is N as in Nancy. Okay. MH and NH are tangent line segments. The radius of the circle is 168 millimeters, and the perimeter of quadrilateral GMHN. Oh, I see what's happening here. So they're tangent. So I need to draw this a little bit more accurately, but now I see how to draw this picture. So I could draw a better picture than that. You create a quadrilateral. So this is M, and then H is out here. If this is N as in Nancy and H is out there. Yeah, not a perfect picture, but this creates a quadrilateral. Okay. Now, the principle that this is actually based on is that anytime a line is tangent to a circle, it makes a right angle with the radial line of the circle. So I know my picture is not perfect, but this has to be a right angle by definition, and this has to be a right angle by definition. So now the radius is, that's a 168, and that's a 168. The perimeter of the quadrilateral is 3856. So then each of these pieces, each of those pieces must be 3856 minus the quantity 2 times 168. So actually, let me label this as x and x, right? It would have been 2 times 168 plus 2 times x equals the perimeter of the quadrilateral. So x itself is 1,760 millimeters. Then it says, what's the distance in millimeters between points G and H? So you end up with a right triangle, right? You end up with finding the hypotenuse of this right triangle, where this is 1760. So it's 168 squared plus 1760 squared is c squared, where c is what you're looking for. So 1760 squared plus the quantity 168 squared, I'm looking at c equals this big number, or c squared I say, equals 3125824, and the square root of that is 1768. Function f is defined by that, where a, b, and c are constants. The graph of y equals fx in the xy plane passes through points 7, 0, and negative 3, 0. If a is an integer greater than 1, which of the following could be the value of a plus b? Well, whenever you have points that satisfy an equation and the equation, they want you to plug in what you get. So Let me recopy and then write what you get when you actually plug in. So using 7 comma 0, you get 0 equals, I'm just going to write it out the long way, a times 7 squared plus b times 7 plus c. So 0 equals 49a plus 7b plus c. Okay? And then completely separately from that, using the other given point, you get 0 equals a times negative 3 squared plus b times negative 3 plus c, as in 0 equals 9a minus 3b plus c. Now if I write those two expressions on top of each other, I'm guessing I can actually get somewhere helpful with this. Because if you subtracted the bottom expression from the top expression, the c's would disappear. So you'd still be left with 0 equals 40a, and then 7b minus negative 3b is 10b. So you could get to here. If a is an integer greater than 1, which of the following could be the value of a plus b? I think what you have to do is define one of them in terms of the other. So when you get to here, I'm going to keep going. So now I'm going to put negative 10b on the other side for equaling 40a, and divide both sides by negative 10. So b is negative 4a. So now a is an integer greater than 1. Let's make a table. Yeah, so this is about a sort of table of possibilities, right? So a is an integer greater than 1. So it's what's a, and then what's b, and then what's a plus b, and we'll just keep going until we deduce the pattern or get one of the answer choices. So if a is an integer greater than 1, which has to be 2 is the minimum, then b would be negative 8, and then a plus b would be negative 6. Oh, which I think is the answer, but let's keep going from there. Then if a was 3, b would be negative 12, which would give you negative 9. And then if a was 4, b would be negative 16, which would give you negative 12. And then if a was 5, b would be negative 20, which would give you negative 15. Yeah, and you can see the pattern of what the possible values are for the sum. It's negative 6 counting downward by 3. So the only acceptable answer is A. That's a tricky question, right? Because you have to define, you have to write out the application of plugging in the given point. You have to reduce as a system. Then you have to solve for one variable in terms of the other. And then even then, you still have to write out the series of possibilities for what it could be to determine the pattern. But it's A.